Disorganized plays here today.
That's it?
It's me with Zook. It's me with Zook. I'm with Zook. Hey, you did it to your own headphones. Don't look at me. I wasn't the one who requested opera. There you go. Hi, everyone. It's me, Tom Lummel. I'm your co-host of Disorganized Play. I am your dungeon master for our weekly 5e Dungeons & Dragons game here on Wednesdays on Saving Throw Show. Today's Thursday. It's the day we have the recap. I'm joined by my illustrious co-host and producer for the channel, Mr. Zook.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
How's it going?
It is going well. Mm-hmm. Should we do the show as robots today?
Well done.
Hello. Welcome to our show.
I'm a much more advanced robot, I guess.
Are you?
Yeah.
I
don't have to do that.
I'm not an advanced I only talk when my arms move.
Right. Oh boy.
All right. Hey, time to unsub, says Jen Human. Yeah, you know. I don't blame.
You're not subbed.
You're not subbed anyhow, so go F yourself. So on Tuesdays, we get together and talk about what's going to happen in the Dungeons & Dragons game. On Wednesday, we're foiled by the wily charms of our players and defeated in our efforts to achieve whatever we wanted to accomplish, as laid out on Tuesday. On Thursday, we commiserate and talk about how great our players are and how stupid we are for planning so far ahead and all these wonderful things that might happen. And then each and every week, we inch ever closer to actually starting the adventure. Expedition to the Buried Peaks.
Yeah, so close.
What's that philosophical thought experiment where if you just keep having a distance, do you ever actually get there?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? So you start off 10 miles away, and then you travel half the distance. But if each time you only travel half the distance, do you ever truly arrive at your destination?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Practical.
Answered.
Yes. I'm here to prove Dom wrong. we can take half steps towards this adventure for a long time. We've done it for 3 weeks so far.
Yes, we can.
I bet we can get another month and a half in for sure.
Probably. DJ Regular, welcome.
Welcome. So we have several things to talk about. We'll also be taking your questions about your game and whatnot during the show if you have.
Thank you, Shimmickson.
Oh, all right, Shimmickson. I see whose side you're on. Yeah. Fine.
The big words side.
Yeah. You'll be close enough to just give that destination a smooch.
Right.
That's what we're gonna. That's where we got to this session. Was we got close enough to give the Expedition to the Buried Peaks a smooch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next week we start Sunless Citadel all over again.
Then it exploded into a giant swarm of evil hell bees.
Yes.
So our topics today are actually a little more broad than just a straight recap. Yeah, we'll never get there while the tips are coming in. That's true and untrue at the same time. So problems without ready solutions is one of our topics today. Constrained benefits is the other thing that we're going to talk about. And then finally, I will show you some artwork. If you're a Patreon backer, you've already seen some of the artwork, but there's some artwork that I did last night that got shown on the stream and some that did not get shown, and I'll have both of those pieces and talk about how I made them and maybe why I made them and how you too may be able to deploy this technique on your very own. That's the teaser. That's the incentive to stick with us for the whole show.
That's the cold open, and now we go into the flashy intro.
Is it really? Oh boy, I did a terrible opening monologue if that's the case. Is this like Saturday Night Live, or is it more of like a variety show?
It's more like a Linus Tech Tips kind of thing.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, God. Well, we need to change all of this around. Just hang a bunch of graphics cards on the wall. That's too expensive. They're all mining.
It's like Linus Tech Tips. It's not Linus Tech Tips.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Linus Tech Tips. I'm Tom Linus. This is my co-host, Dom Graphics Card.
Yeah. Now they're unsubbing.
Dom Bitcoin. Dom Bitcoin. All right, so I don't really necessarily want to. This feels so nice. The table feels really nice. You know how when you get one of those matte RPG books that you just kind of like you pick it up and you just rub your hand over it. This is a similar kind of tactile situation.
Tune in for 20 minutes of Tom and I.
It's like ASMR for your hands, except you can't feel it.
Yeah, you can't feel it. Find your softest piece of clothing and just rub along with us.
So I don't want to do a straight up recap last night. I do want to ask you though, like, did you have a favorite moment from the game yesterday?
Did I have a favorite moment from the game?
I mean, I know you're deeply involved with monitoring chat and keeping the cameras rolling and everything updated, but was there a moment from the game last night that you enjoyed?
It probably the meeting of the gnome-like people.
Yeah, the giant gnomes.
Yeah, the giant gnomes.
That was interesting. Yeah, I enjoyed that part.
I mean, I think the easy answer is Avril blowing up the goat.
Exploding goats.
Yeah, but I knew that was going to happen. Like there was no question that something along those lines was going to happen.
Right. Well, I will say that if chat hadn't kicked in to make it like super weird, then I think they probably would have been like either really tough goats or yeah, Fuckwhat says there's not much that can top last week's ongoing fart bit. Yeah. That's true. I did have a bunch of different stats prepared for that encounter because I knew that something was probably going to happen, right? But I really did enjoy, especially when I critted Garav. Boy, I wish he hadn't spent that luck point to make me re-roll because 12 die 6 damage, that would have been so juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been fantastic. As it was, it worked out really well. I liked that combat because that monster hit really hard and was gross and frightening. But
would have done about 39. 39 points of damage.
That's below average, buddy. I hate to tell you.
Hey, that's what
your average should be closer to 42.
It's
43.
random, Tom. They're random number generators.
Yeah.
It's not an average number generator.
Well, there's an average number that's in the book that you can use. They provide it for every single entry, whether you want it or not. Apparently, they think people don't like rolling dice, which I don't understand. It's really, I know people who swear by like, oh, I just use the average to make combat go a lot faster. I'm like, you're robbing me of the one joy I'm guaranteed to have during a game of Dungeons and Dragons, which is to pick up my $35 dice and roll them on the table.
Right.
So, there's that. So I knew that could go in a number of different ways, but I loved how that was. I thought maybe somebody else at the table would actually get involved in the hijinks. I was a little bit surprised that they were very clearly lined up against Avril. Like, don't do this.
Right.
We're going to obey this. And I get that Grayson was going to be that way.
Yeah.
It was interesting that Ava lined up with Grayson. And Thawne, I thought maybe he'd be like, well, let's just see what happens. I don't know. It's interesting.
I think... Wow, did you roll a 1 on every one of those die? You rolled 13d6 and you
No, he put a space.
There you go. Roll 13, you got a 13. That's what happens. I don't know if they're tired of Avril's bit, but I know that Ava would have respected the rules, which stated that the goats they're
sacred, right?
Sacred,
That's pretty key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily put as much weight into that as I don't or recognize that was going to carry that much weight with her. Grayson's a rule enforcer, so that made sense to me. But it was fine. Like it worked out, and also like it does give Havana an in-game reason to change the behavior of her character if she wants to, right? Like,
sure.
Like it is always a little weird when the character just changes because the player decides that the character needs to change. It's nice sometimes if that character is really like intruding on the group dynamic.
Right.
But it now gives them a piece of history that they can go, oh, this is just like the goats, isn't it? I will say that one thing that inspired that particular encounter was the wolf in sheep's clothing that appears in Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, right? So I think they're either that kind of replaces that thing, or it may be like a callback to it later, or they see, I don't know. I don't know that the players are going to attack a rabbit on a stump. They have no reason to do that. Actually, I could see Avril approaching it, and then the eyeballs come up and the tentacles encase her. And,
sure.
Yeah, that's terrible. But that was one thing that inspired it. So, yeah. I mean, I liked the gnomes. For me personally, it was honestly a very big role-playing challenge to speak a foreign language in a different accent and try to explain things like, well, there are dimensional portals that randomly appear all over the mountain, and we use our staffs to detect them. I realized I should have gotten, I should have
looked up a few more
looked
words,
up a few more words in my German English dictionary before I got there. So,
SciMath, what?
Yeah,
you want to tell Tom what you were?
Do you want to give me a rating on a now? Let's keep in mind that on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is fluent and 1 is just learned German out of a high school textbook, I'm only expecting you to score like at most probably a 4.5. So.
Let's see if you made it.
Yeah, let's see.
So the scale is now 1 to 4.5.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm topping out. If anything over 4.5, I'm like juiced it.
Yeah.
I will say that part of that was inspired when I lived in Germany for Herbstferien. We went up to Denmark and went fishing. And the guy who ran the local shop, like the little smoke shop, where we would, like in a little grocery store, we'd go in and we'd like buy some toast and we'd buy some pipe tobacco and buy some beers or whatever. Every day we were in there like buying another loaf of bread and another like 12-pack of beer.
Yeah.
He spoke German with a Danish accent.
Oh, interesting.
And so my friends would now like my friend, one of my friends was only like 2 years older, but then we were there with his dad. His dad was like, I don't know, 47 or 48 at the time. But they were just like totally like dissing on this guy because he had this goofy ass Danish accent.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh no, I think he speaks fine. And then I started imitating him. Like doing a Danish accent in German. They thought it was the most hilarious thing. Like years later, I went back and they were like, "Oh, oh, I got a 5."
Wow.
Well, thank you,
Right, you
thank
blew
you.
it away.
It was all right. It was fun. It was an interesting challenge. That brings us around to our first topic of today, right? So there were a couple situations that I set up that I consider these problems without ready solutions. Now, there's two sides to that, right? Maybe in 20 years. I got my haircut today, and the woman was like, "Do you want? Have you tried a little bit of our instant coloring?" And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" She's like, "It takes 10 minutes, and it'll take 5 years off of your."
You're like, "Wait a minute,
I'm
no,
like,
go back."
What are you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I can't play 13. Anyway, so there's two sides to this problems without ready solutions, right? One of them is a design goal where I just create a situation where I don't know how they're going to solve it, right? And that's kind of my. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I'm like, well, this is a problem that I don't know how they're going to fix it. Like they don't have a magic MacGuffin, they don't have a spell. You know, some things you can go, okay, well, there's a locked door. Like we're approaching a locked door, right? Well, you know, Grayson, the noble knight here, has a sword that destroys anything.
Right.
So I can instantly go, well, even if I give them some sort of very complex locking mechanism that they're not gonna, you know, they'll have trouble deciphering, and they might spend an hour and a half trying to decode. I can basically like throw that out the window because he's just going to go, I'm just going to knock it down.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to cut a hole in it.
Right.
So that's those are things where you go, okay, well, the players have something that they could use a thing where they could attack this problem, right? But as I did last night, there were two different things where I created problems without a ready solution. Now, the language thing with the gnomes, I knew that the giant gnomes did not speak anything that they had in common. Like I might have, if we went around the table and somebody said, "I speak Gnomish," then I might have given them like some of the words.
They
right?
did. Someone did speak Gnomish.
No, nobody speaks Gnomish.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought that Grayson had said.
No, he speaks like Dwarvish and Infernal and Common and Halfling. Nobody said gnomish.
Huh.
Yeah, yeah, I was listening for that. So, and I thought about even like with halfling, well, maybe I'll give it to him or something like that. But I figured, well, this is going to be a challenge. Like, let's make this a challenge that is not like, okay, well, now you can readily communicate. Because what they had to convey was not a simple thought, but it was a singular thought, right? They're the portals on the mountain. We use these sticks to detect and avoid them. And the only other thing that they really needed to complain was actually two things. One was that what they wanted in exchange for those things, and the other was I just had a feeling that he was gonna like. I was like, they've probably encountered doppelgangers before. If this is the birthplace of the doppelganger, they must have some notion or familiarity or mythology around these things. And that's when I was like, they think doppelgangers are holy men. I thought it was a little. I felt like I was riding the theme pretty hard by having them be able to sniff out who a doppelganger was, because we've done that a number of times now, and it's starting to get a little too obvious, right? Like, too many people know that he's a doppelganger. But I think, I do think that it was interesting then to flip it around and have them worship, a doppelganger, right? Like they're not threatened by him. Right. They're in fact they're in awe of him, and that I think turned it around, made it an interesting encounter. Yeah, I do thank you, Siamath Pirnikov, for translating during the thing. I didn't have time today because I had a bunch of other things going on, like getting a haircut. I mean that was 17 minutes.
What if DJ Regular went over to Germany and stayed at Siamath's place, and Siamath came over to the U.S. and stayed at DJ Regular's place?
It's like a Twitch exchange program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
So with regarding the doppelganger thing,
yes.
So if they are in awe or semi-worshipful of doppelgangers, that means that the doppelgangers that have come out of this place have probably left a good impression and not been the evil doppelgangers that plague the world.
Well, I mean, that's possible. It's also possible
because they didn't seem afraid of him.
No. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's possible that they somehow like told everybody that they're divine beings or whatever it was. I don't know. I didn't actually have a backstory for why that was. My backstory is that they're weird, mutated gnomes. I think, honestly, they might end up being... So we've talked about how there's all these different cultures that we want to, or...
What if they're hobbits? Shire folk.
11sies? Yeah. We've talked about how we want to introduce different factions within the ship, right? And I'm wondering if the gnomes aren't some sort of like spun off... Like they're the maintenance crew, like the engineering, like down and dirty, working in the actual turbo shafts kind of maintenance crew guys who somehow got expelled from the ship and then lost their connection to the ship, and now they just kind of like wander around. Or maybe those guys are hiding a secret, like they're like, oh, if we get enough dilithium crystals together, we can fix the ship. There's plenty of different ways we can go with that. But I thought it was interesting, like let's introduce. We talked about themes on Tuesday. Let's introduce the alienation aspect of they don't speak your language, what are you going to do? And then also, these guys are something that you recognize, but weirder.
Yeah.
So they're taller than gnomes, and they're lanky, and they have these weird purple blotches and sunburned skin, and what's that all about? So I did want to use it as it's a Schrodinger's clue that we can potentially foreshadow what's going on inside the ship, right? Yeah. So there's a callback there. There's potentially a callback there, as BSB Care points out, for those gnomes to be mutants or whatever.
There's also, we were talking about it on Tuesday with the goats, and the goats were surveillance tools for some other outside force, right?
Yeah.
It could be that these mutant gnomes, these giant gnomes, were somehow paid off in a way that they don't know about. From someone who just is like very friendly. It's just like, hey, I'm just looking for people too, you know, just let me know anytime you hear about anything.
Right,
And they're just
right.
like, oh, hey, we heard about this guy. Oh, thank you so much. Now I will murder him. You know?
Oh, that's possible. Yeah, that's tricky because I don't want to set up the gnomes as like a double cross. That
Right.
feels a little a little dirty.
I think if they don't
right?
know that they're, you know.
Oh, if the gnomes don't know, yeah,
don't know,
that's possible. I think what I like is that the goats are the weird surveillance force, and that's why they exploded into these eyeball things. And honestly, if he had failed his poison saving throw, he would have gotten like infected with like a little tracking device. Right? That would have let the whatever entity it is that's monitoring the mountain.
Army of Darkness have him like grow a little eyeball. Was it Army of Darkness?
Yeah, maybe.
As he starts splitting into two. Anyway.
Personally, Simeth Prinikov, since we're talking about my weird German stuff with the gnomes, I was proud of describing what happens when you fall into a pocket dimension. You just come out burned. Yeah. I had a whole table of various pocket dimensions they could stumble into. I'll have it on my iPad. Maybe I'll read it if we have a little extra time here. So that was one potential problem that we didn't have a solution for. They did kind of get stuck on it, right? Like they kind of checked like, okay, what languages did you speak? And then they didn't really attack it in any way, like any tangible way other than let's try and talk through it, until finally Avril shows up and goes, let me draw you a picture. And even then it's like, oh, what does this mean? Like she showed like a staff and like, angry face. And he's like, no, the staff doesn't make you angry. The staff makes you happy. And that sort of stuff.
Yeah. They needed tack.
Yeah. Well, and it was an interesting moment for Grayson to have like a moral crisis of, I could read thoughts on these guys and know what they're talking about.
Right.
And he decided not to. I was hoping that he honestly would kind of fail that test.
Sure.
I thought it would be more interesting for his character to realize that he's back up against the wall and he needs to give in to his true nature, right? But there's always more opportunities for that. But that would have been actually a solution that I hadn't thought of that they could have found their way to. And so one of the reasons I, as a DM, put this stuff together is it gives me an opportunity to be surprised by what the players are going to do, right?
Yeah.
It's dangerous in that the second circumstance where this was introduced in the game last night was with scouting the mountain, right? And the mountain is covered with this toxic smog. And there wasn't really a great solution for that. Honestly, the solution that they came up with, which was like run our Cuboforce for 30 minutes, is not, like, I don't think that gets you a whole lot of scouting, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I kind of gave him a little bit of a pass on that I didn't give him a total pass. The thing was, if they had rolled higher on their search or perception checks, they might have seen like the area where the cave was. But as it was, they just got the low-hanging fruit of like, oh, well, you see a hut and there's potential to go talk to people.
Right.
So, so that was another situation where I didn't have a great solution for them. And the problem is they had kind of some like half-ass solutions that I didn't think were particularly innovative, creative, or interesting. Right?
Yeah.
And so the game sort of like reached this kind of like stalemate where I'm like, you could do one of these two things, neither of which, like, they wanted to do the one that I didn't think was particularly effective, but it was safer, right? And I wanted them to like land the ship and go walk around, which was more dangerous, but also I thought more effective.
Yeah.
I could have prepped the description of all of that a little bit better and maybe like shown on the map, like these are the areas, like above this elevation, it's fog and da-da-da-da, you know, there's things like that I could have done, right? So, that's, it's an interesting DMing technique because, like I said, it allows you to be surprised by what the players come up with. But you do have to, you do have to find a way to embrace whatever solution they come up with, because if you just keep batting them back and saying, no, that doesn't work, I don't really like that idea, then they get frustrated, they stall out on ideas, and then you either have to like go back over ground that you covered. Well, on second thought, if you did this, but you did it a little differently, it'd probably work. That feels like kind of a weird concession to the players. Like, why didn't you just say yes to them in the first place, right? So it's a dangerous technique, but it is a way to design an encounter that is going to be hopefully engaging for the players, but also engaging for you. Like, okay, well, now you're all working on it together. As opposed to, I've got a specific idea of how this is supposed to play out. And if you deviate from my ordained solution, then I'm going to say, no, 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 no. That's tricky, right? It's okay to go, well, this is the problem, and it has multiple solutions that I might be able to sign off on. Then the issue becomes, is it a big enough challenge? If it's too obvious how to solve it, then there's no stakes and there's no risk, and whatever reward they get out of it seems diminished as a result, right? Assuming they get a reward out of it.
Right.
If it's just something trivial of, well, we need to find a scribe to talk to so that we can get this thing copied, why, it doesn't matter. If, like, make a knowledge roll, 8, great, a guy, So depending upon what the stakes are, what the reward is, if it's a low-hanging fruit, who cares? But if it's something that's actually significant either to the plot or it's a significant piece of loot or treasure, you want to make that reward like a little bit, like make them work for it a little bit, right? That's the basis of the game. So those were just two situations where I came up with a problem and did not have a good idea of how to solve it in mind. I intentionally came up with the language barrier to be one, and then I sort of accidentally introduced the whole, like, how are they going to find their way to the cave?
Right.
It's also a little bit, there was a little bit like, well, she's got this map burned on her brain, doesn't she know where the cave is? So that was the premise, the circumstances, the starting circumstances were a little unclear. I should have been more detailed about that. All right, so the next thing that we want to talk about is constrained benefits, right? So this was something that really evidenced itself last night when chat unlocked something useful in the Giants loot, right? Now, I had thought about it being this clockwork messenger bird thing, but I wanted that to be something that Taika had for sure, because it doesn't make sense. Like, I knew that she was going to have to have some sort of recall mechanism, like,
right,
come pick us up, and I wanted her to have that thing. Like,
okay.
I think it would have been a cool thing to find. You find this little metal birdhouse with a little bird inside, and oh, here's what it does. But so then I spun off on that, and I was like, okay, well, what if there was this little clockwork spider thing, right? Now, I wanted to make it special, other than just it's a clockwork spider. I suppose we could have done a thing where you can set it, give it directions, and then it follows those. It follows that map, and then locks into place, right? So that would be a cool thing. Like if you needed to attach a rope to something or whatever, you could put a little eye hook on it, and it holds up to 300 pounds or something, and you could say, all right, well, you can direct it up to 120 feet to do whatever wherever you want, and then lock into place, right? Yeah, Vanna was really mad when the goat was going after the spider, but part of that was like I decided that the goats had to be annoying about something, right? Like if there's one thing about goats, it's like they're gonna try and eat something, and they're gonna try and eat something that you think is important, right? And also, I just rolled low for whatever she was offering the thing. And I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. I want to eat this metal thing that you've got. It smells delicious. So I want to make the spider special in some sort of way, but they've already gotten a whole bunch of items recently that are fairly powerful. So let's not load them up on a ton of items that are super uber powerful. And I was like, well, it would be cool if you could see through the eyes of the spider, but what if it was limited somehow? So it only sees, like this kind of like a circle kind of thing. But I thought the great way that benefit was constrained is you wind it up and you send it in a straight line, and it just goes in a straight line. You can't control it. To me, that makes an item that's interesting, but not something where they're gonna get it out every time. They're like, oh, okay, well, let's send it under the door, let's send it through the pipe. Sure. Like, as long as it's a straight shot, it's fine. But any time like it begins to take a curve, it's going to start to probably get hang up. Right. So, yeah, it was a bad dungeon.
Megan cry.
So I think that, like, I felt like that was very effective. It was an interesting, flavorful item. That's an interesting curiosity. Havana did get somewhat attached to it because it's cool, but it's not so cool that you're going to be like, oh, well, if that thing gets destroyed, nobody cares. Yeah. Right. That's fine. Like, I'm okay with that. It was a nice way to. Here's what I'm going to say. It was a nice way to not balance a magic item, right? So I mean, technically, the idea is we gave them a magic item is essentially what it is. It's sort of like a clairvoyance, wizard eye type of thing, right? But it's got this very specific constraint on it that makes it less valuable than a magic item. So it feels cool and special because it's unique. So in that way, it's better than just like a scroll of clairvoyance or whatever. But it only operates in this one very specific way. Yeah. And so that's where you're like, oh, it created an interesting moment where it created another challenge for them. Like, how could we use this that it wouldn't, how can we apply this in a way that it actually works? You know, she was like, oh, I'm just going to drive it into the gnome's hut. I'm like, well, you'd have to set it up and like aim it so that it could, go directly and sneak into the door. Right. What? Oh yeah, I don't control it. Yeah. It's an item that comes with its own like little kind of like brain teaser puzzle, but it's not so complicated that you're like, oh, we have to remember how the cipher works for this thing every time. So, Shimmickson says, noob DM question, do you ever destroy PC's magic and valuable gear maybe as a culling device? I generally don't. It is something that you have in your quiver as a DM. It's a little weird, right? Like, you can take PC's hit points away temporarily. They're used to that all the time. That doesn't bother them at all. You could even like place curses on them so that they're maybe temporarily blinded, or they can't go in a certain place or whatever, and they'll generally be okay with that. But if you have them fight a thing that like snaps a guy's magic sword in half, they get really mad. Like they get personally offended. I think you have to be very careful playing that card. Like, I think it needs to be a story point. I would really, really strongly discourage you from just randomly putting it into an encounter or whatever, or not foreshadowing it at all, right? That feels like dirty DM pool, because generally in Dungeons and Dragons, you earn rewards and the players decide whether to dispose of them or not, right? So they earn gold pieces and they decide to spend them and get something in return, right? Oh, I've got 1,000 gold pieces. Now I can get that set of plate mail that I wanted. Well, generally you don't destroy their plate mail or whatever. And so it feels like it is one of those moments where you are crossing over that line of ownership between the DM, and I control the world out here, and the player who controls their character and the things attached to their character. So you could do it, I think, with some foreshadowing. This guy is renowned for having, or this is the wood of the disenchanter who has been known to drain the eldritch essence out of magic items, etc., or whatever. So I think with a little heads up, it's fine. I would not just do it out of the blue or do it randomly. Yeah, with some foreshadowing, like there's skeletons with broken weapons that still radiate some magic, or you find this cache of swords that are all pitted and rusted, and yet they have names engraved on them. Where if you do a history check, you're like, well, these are famous weapons. These are something. Now all of a sudden, the great thing about that is it raises the stakes. The guy who's got that magic sword is like, oh, shit. It creates a moment of drama, but I think you have to be careful about it. In 3rd edition, there was kind of this like casual, like, a little bit more laissez-faire, like, don't forget you can destroy people's... Well, that's where Shatterspike comes from, right? Is 3rd edition. And I would be careful about that, because like I said, you're treading on a boundary that a lot of players themselves don't like the DM to put their little gritty little claws in. It certainly opens up an opportunity for something bigger and better to come along, or a quest to reforge the item or whatever. But you have to do it carefully, considerately, and deliberately. So that's that. So I'll take some more questions here at the end, but I do want to show you some of the art and art techniques that I used last night. Is this, what is this? Oh, that's not that. That's not the thing. Where are the things? Do we have the overhead cam, Dom?
We do, yes.
We do. Yes, we do. So I've been having a lot of fun with tracing paper lately, right? Like that's, anybody who tuned in last week or tuned in on Tuesday saw that. So obviously, we're gonna get to all of this stuff, right? Oh yeah, so here's the map of this is available to our Patreon backers, right? This map that I drew. We talked about that. And I decided that, one of the things that I love about Expedition to the Barrier Peaks is it has an entire illustration booklet with like 60-some illustrations to it, right? Well, I wanted to have something to kind of introduce that concept in last night's session, but we did get there. We didn't quite get there, right? So if you're a Patreon backer, this illustration is in your backer folder. Now, I didn't work on it like a lot of time. Obviously, like the cave here is a very rudimentary drawing. I think it is effective. Like I think it gives you an idea, like especially as described, that these are like little scales of silver. It gives you kind of that, that it's been built up layer after layer after layer, which is something that I like. But the real purpose of putting this illustration together was we have this problem that was introduced in the PowerPoint presentation about the Barrier Peaks, which is there's this door that doesn't have anything, like how do we even open it? It's just this black, this solid door. And so that was a problem that I wanted to investigate, but I also wanted to come up with like some sort of way for them to solve it, right? So what I decided is that the door is part of the ship, right? Part of the ship, this is where the ship like bumps up against the prime material plane or whatever. And this is where you can go in. This is the door in and out of the ship. To go along with our theme of like isolation and alienation, I don't want to use regular typeface. I don't want to use a standard Roman alphabet when it comes down to labeling things in the ship. So I found a font that's like Martian markup or something like that. And I installed that on my machine. And then these characters tripped off, I don't know if you remember at the end of the session last night, like Avril's like perfect memory of the ship, right? Well, there's information in that map that will help them open up these doors, right? So part of the reason that there's this illustration is that it serves the purpose of giving me a point where I evoke, oh, okay, wow, this comes to you, this comes back up, bubbles up back into your mind, right? And rather than saying, oh, okay, at the end of it, there's this door, and there are these strange markings, and as you stare at the markings, blah, blah, blah. I wanted there to be something actually visual that they could look at, right? Now, I could have taken this font and printed it off and traced it by hand and given it like that handmade look or whatever. But I didn't want to do that.
But why? Why? Why did you do that?
Because a big part of it was on the map. It is hand drawn. I did do my best to like hand draw those characters in sequence, and that they mean something. But here, it's part of the labeling of the ship, right? It's something that would have been stenciled on or whatever like that. Well, I have ideas about Grayson going after the door with Shatterspike. That's fine, right? So I'm not going to break Shatterspike, but part of it is if you wield that kind of force where you can break things, sometimes that should be an advantage that you just naturally get to use. Sure, cool. And then sometimes it should be something where it has consequences, right? For instance, if you wanted to break into somebody's house, you could, kick the door in, but it's going to make a lot of noise, and it's going to be obvious to anybody driving down the street that door's been kicked in.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I don't want it to just fail. I don't want him to like hit it and it doesn't, and it's somehow impervious. Like I've done that once or twice before, and I think then the player goes, well, if you're just going to GM fiat that everything's made out of this crazy magical metal material, then why do I even have the frickin' sword, right? Like, why don't you just tell me when it works, and I won't bother trying it anymore. So I don't want to do that either. So it's a design problem. We can talk about that really on Tuesday. Anyway, so I had an idea of I wanted to get this on here, but I wanted it to look like it was printed on there, like it was stenciled or printed on there. So instead of tracing it, the other thing I thought is like, well, maybe I'll feed tracing paper into my printer, but that seemed like a really bad idea. So I didn't do that because I could have just had that part of it printed, get my Word doc kind of like aligned so that this would come in. Here's what I ended up doing instead. So I took a piece of tracing paper, and you can tell from this view, I don't know how well you can tell from this view, but I printed that phrase off and cut it out off of my little piece of paper, and then I taped it onto the tracing paper, and then I drew the rest of the scene on the front side of the tracing paper, right?
Yep.
So the way that this pays off is you take your tracing paper with your stuff taped to it, and you lay it down on your scanner / printer / copier, and I close the scanner bed, pushed copy, and out comes this thing that essentially flattens all of these layers, right? Because the white background and the light of the laser pushes everything together and does like a fairly decent scan. Now I did have to do a bunch of
those photo stats back in my day.
Yeah, we did some photo stats. Yeah. So I did have to do a couple different passes on it because it didn't always turn out, the exposure didn't always turn out exactly the way that I wanted them to. Sometimes it was too dark. Sometimes, this was I think the first one that I did, and it just looked a little too scribbly. It looked a little too much like it was drawn. Then I went in and smudged everything, and then it looked too much like it was just a cloud, right? So somewhere in here is where I got to the point where, I think this maybe is close to the final, where it looks like the ship is maybe dirty and dilapidated or whatever. But it has enough of a texture to it that looks like it's probably metal, and it maybe reflects some light, right? So I did have to monkey with it a bit, but I thought it was a technique that was quick, fairly ingenious, and worked surprisingly well for what I wanted it to do, especially where it was I want stuff printed off. I suppose I could have drawn this, copied it, and then run that paper through the printer when I printed it too, but I don't know. That's up to. That's just a different approach. I liked this idea that I could just tape stuff on here and have stuff shine through the different layers and then have it actually get kind of reproduced. Yeah, I have ideas about what the doppelgangers, how the doppelgangers operate, what they are and whatnot. So I don't think that's going to be. I don't think it's going to be that much of a slam dunk solution. They have exactly what they need in order to solve this. Either they have Shatter Spike, which will work in some fashion. I'm not saying there won't be consequences, or they actually have information that will allow them to enter the cave. So the other, one of the other reasons that I was late last night was I wanted to introduce these owls. So I did a quick drawing. This was not quite as successful in execution, although it was relatively quick. I think I spent 15 minutes on this, which in hindsight was 15 minutes more than I had, but we had the opportunity for chat to unlock. They find an owl, which essentially I wanted some sort of. I'm thinking about ways that technology might actually be deployed on the ship that are different than what's presented in the module, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought about having some sort of like little floating kind of like bit character, like, just like an R2-D2 style or BB-8 style, kind of like little robot helper thing that maybe could be a technological MacGuffin or bridge the gap or, start amassing their learning into some place where it's like, okay, well, if you feed it this card, and then it'll automatically open any door that's keyed to that card.
It should be like Clippy.
Yeah. Hi.
Pops up. It looks like you're trying to discover a new.
It looks like you're trying to learn how to use a ray gun. I don't want it to necessarily always be that helpful, but a couple things. This is very. I hope it's very obvious. This is very obviously based on a Bluetooth speaker. But the cool thing about that is I can actually like bring one and set it on the table if I want and have it make noises. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think it would be neat if there were these sort of like, it also reminds me of a pneumatic tube from the bank teller. Remember the old drive-up bank teller where you put your checks and stuff in the case and close it up and send it off. It reminds me a little bit of that. And so it made me think, God, wouldn't it be neat if there were little slots and panels all over the ship where these things could like go in and like, go away or whatever. And that gives you the opportunity to have these things pop up wherever you want them to pop up. So I think that's neat. OWL stands for Organic Worker Liaison. Okay. That's what I've set up for now. I don't know that they'll ever find out
what Ogres and Warlocks League.
Ogres
we're not playing Blood Bowl, so that's different.
Ordinary wizard level.
We'll play Blood Bowl another time.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's an opportunity. I don't know how much of a character this will become.
Yeah, there's no Bubo in here, unfortunately.
I don't know what.
Clash of the Titans.
So when I was like putting thoughts into the ship, I did think of like, what if the AI is sort of loosely based off of the goddess Minerva, right? Mm-hmm. Who's the forerunner to Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and her kind of totemic animal or whatever you want to call it is the owl, right? The owl of wisdom. And so I thought, well, maybe these are kind of like that, kind of like, anytime you want, it's almost like it's the smartphone of the ship, but it's not, it's like a floating Alexa, I don't know if it's going to have that full of a capability or that kind of one-to-one mapping. I do think it would be fun to have a little soundboard that would be mapped to be like, this is a yes noise, this is a no noise, do some beeps and quirks and things like that. And also, it might warn them of potentially dangerous areas. You know, if you're walking into an area that has a huge radiation leak, you might not know what it is. Yeah, is it connected to the AI? Is it not connected to the AI? If there's more than one AI, which AI is it connected to? Was it altered? Is it altered by the catastrophe going on, you know, the cataclysm that's happening on the ship? I don't know, but...
I would say it's not connected to... It could be connected to one of the AIs, but I think in order to maintain that the AIs are incapable of connecting or communicating with each other, you don't want something that's free-floating.
Yeah, they could just... I'll send one down there and talk to it. Yeah. And I think also that this is designed... Like, my idea for this thing is that it's like your smartphone. Like, it attaches to a person. Yeah. You know, and so it follows you around and tries to help you out, right? So it's like it's really a personal assistant kind of thing.
It's sort of like that. I haven't played it, but in Destiny, right? Don't you have like a little guy that follows you around?
And he like does stuff like, hang on, I'm going to open the door and all that kind of garbage, except it's annoying as hang on, I'm going to suspend the plot for 10 minutes while you fight 6 waves of monsters. Got it. Thanks. That's an Assassin's Creed thing. I've never played Assassin's Creed. I think we're gonna discover what the character of this thing is, you know, once it makes contact with the players. And also, it depends upon what their reaction to it is, right? Like, do they like the thing? Do they think it's cute? Or do they think it's annoying? Right. That's honestly like a 50-50 proposition. Right. Who knows? Yeah. But I like the idea of it having kind of like, you know, of having some sort of sidekick type of presence that could be a conduit for the DM to help give them hints and direction or simplify problems that they're just stuck on or whatever. But it is also limited in its functionality, right? Like, it probably doesn't have any lasers or something like that, or it doesn't necessarily automatically open doors or things like that. Yeah, there's a bunch of different...
I hope that they like it and it catches on and it's fun, because I would love someone to, like, at a convention, do some sort of cosplay or something.
As an owl?
Yeah. Not cosplay as an owl, but basically, like, you know, get one of those little drones. Yeah. And then connect it, like build a drone basically, and just have it with a... Because you could have a Bluetooth speaker, and then you could have that connected to like a microphone or something, so that it could fly up next to people, and you could be like 30 feet away or something, and just be like, "Hi, I'm." You know.
So
sorry,
I tried
Go ahead.
I tried an experiment with this. Touch ID, enter passcode.
Wow, that's all you have to do?
That's it.
You just have to say what it's.
Yeah. Open passcode, Touch ID. So this is I have a Boom 2 Bluetooth speaker at home, and so what I tried to do was I tried to take the. I know it's hard to say. It didn't work because unless you could turn off the capacitive touch surface, as you draw, the image goes like this.
Sure, yeah.
Right? But I did take some reference photos. I could have, I suppose...
makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes you think. I loved that bit. That was hilarious. I had a hard time. I tried to drop one in there when Thon was talking about hooking up with Taika.
Right, yeah.
Or having babies or whatever. Although that was an interesting moment where... I thought that was an interesting point of... How can you ever truly be human if you don't fall in love?
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes you think.
So I took a couple of reference photos and then drew and embellished off the reference photos. Yeah, it was fun. It didn't work the way that I wanted it to, but it was fun. So that's just some art. If you're a Patreon backer, both of these images, the owl and the cave of the iron worm, is in there. It actually, your version is a little fancier because I put a lighting effect on there.
You know, BSPK, I believe, was talking about how it looked like tree rings and stuff. What it looks like to me is a blast radius, like this has been melted away.
Yeah.
You know.
theoretically, so the idea that I have in mind, I don't know why I'm giving this away, but what the hell, is if mostly because they didn't really explore the cave very heavily. I didn't give them a lot of hooks to explore the cave. But if they were to actually ever look closely at the little rings and at the scales, because I've said it's not really rings, it's scales, right? It's like bands of scales. If they were to search the cave with any sort of intent, they would find that there's like little kind of like termite or tick type creatures that are dispensing this, like they're eating material and then dispensing a layer of adamantium. So there's essentially like this nanite swarm that is converting this stuff into adamantium, whatever it is, whether it's energy plus.
So you get a little nest of it, and then stick a sword in there so that they cover the sword in adamantium.
Well, they ate the thing was there's those 3 skeletons that they encountered at the entrance of the cave. They also didn't do jack with those things.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where the nanites are living right now. But they've converted all of the skeletons either into adamantium or they've encased those guys in adamantium. And I think my thought was they've eaten the equipment away.
Yeah.
That was also a very cheap way to go, oh yeah, you don't find anything on these guys.
They're adamant.
Oh, they're adamant. Oh, Bastion Phils. That and the Ronald Ray gun.
Yeah. That's 2 strikes.
Yeah. You're on thin ice. You got fired from Twitter. Don't get fired from Twitch.
Slimaf had a question. How about having your players learning new skills / increasing their attributes through training? How should I balance it, especially if I do not have 10 work weeks of game time like presented in Xanathars?
Oh, you mean like downtime? Like in Xanathars they have downtime,
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
How to do training? Well, I'm trying to understand what the I'm trying to understand what the issue is in terms of why can't you say, okay, we're going to have a montage, we're going to have a training montage. Tell me what you'd like to do, and then I'll describe, what happens during the 10 weeks of downtime. Like, do you have some sort of pressure cooker on your plot where they can't take 10 weeks off? In that case, I'm going to assume that that's kind of the issue, is that you've got some sort of ticking time bomb thing going on, right? But I think I would probably have them find some sort of spirit or some sort of object, magic item that's embedded with the memories of, one of the greatest wrestlers who ever lived, and that improves their athletic scores. Or, they find a piece of jewelry like a tiara or a headband or circlet or something like that would contain memories of a great wizard who was a potion brewer or whatever it was. So that's one way to short circuit it. You could also theoretically create some sort of spiritual companion, right? So it could be somebody, when I open my recipe book, the spirit of the wizard who used to own the thing, actually he manifests and he gives you advice and guidance, and that gives you an X plus bonus to your roll, right? So it could be a circumstantial advancement, as it were. In terms of juicing your stats, I mean, have them find a book, have them find a magic item. Those are the most common things. I think one thing that kind of falls by the wayside, which is fun, is if you drink from this magical fountain, you can gain 1d6 points of strength, or or it changes depending upon when you take a drink. You got to roll a certain thing, and if you roll randomly, then you get. It's one of the 6 stats determined at random or whatever. I always think that was like a fun trope that somehow just is completely dropped off the face of modern module design, right? Which that was the whole thing of we want to go screw around with this fountain, because there was always something interesting either to be had by drinking from the fountain, stirring around in the fountain, or by throwing something into the fountain and making a wish, right? That is such a classic fantasy trope, but also such an effective Dungeons and Dragons conundrum of it's like write your wish out for me.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of suspense, there's a lot of drama there. So those are the ways that I would attack that.
BSB asks, might have seen this on Twitter, but what are your thoughts on streaming modules and spoilers?
Oh, before we get to that, Simon cleared up. He says, my ranger really wants to boost your stats because she rolled really bad in comparison to everyone else. Yeah, I think those things apply. I think if they're all really bad, then you have opportunity to figure. I would say pick and choose like what is really sticking for her. Like, oh, it really sucks that I'm a ranger and I want to use a bow, but I've only got a 13 strength, and everybody else has like a 16 or an 18 in their primary class stat, right? Then I would say, okay, well, I know that you have a low intelligence and it's bothering you, but like let's turn that into a character bit, and I'll find a way to like make your combat effectiveness more fun and interesting. I think that's all cool. Like I think you're perfectly allowed to go, compared to everybody else at the table, my character sucks, what do I do? Mm-hmm. You have to take a moment to go, is this a legitimate complaint, or are they just playing their character in a really bad, suboptimal way? Mm-hmm. And you go, well, you could have taken this feat instead. In fact, I'll let you retrain if you want to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's fine to like help tailor it.
Yeah.
You've certainly seen that like with Avril in this game, right? Mm-hmm. We gave her the opportunity to boost her intelligence. She hasn't read the book yet, which is fine. That's all right. So, yes, BSB Care says, what is your opinion on published modules and spoilers? I mean, so really this came up because Mike Shea tweeted about the fact that that Tomb of Annihilation, the ending of Tomb of Annihilation was...
Thank you so much, Blind Seer.
Blind Seer, back in. Thank you.
Another reroll.
Another reroll! Oh, it worked so good last night.
The only rerolls you can buy.
That's right. That's right.
We don't
exactly.
allow any other.
Thank you very much. That's the way... What am I supposed to do? Get extra bumps?
Yeah.
Maybe. I ran low last night.
Yeah.
I ran out last night. Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Simon.
Herzlichen Glückwunsch, as they say.
What he said, Feliz cumpleaños.
Yeah, choose. No, it's not. It's $5 for a reroll for me.
Yeah.
So the reason, the circumstance behind this question is that Tomb of Annihilation, the ending to Tomb of Annihilation got revealed when Chris Perkins ran an Acquisitions Inc. game at PAX South, right? So he ran this big AI game for however 1,000 people were watching, and essentially gave away like what happens with the big bad at the end of Tomb of Annihilation. And like most of those hardback modules that are that like tough and meaty, most people aren't through it yet,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people who are just starting it.
Right.
So my feeling on that is
Whoa, Shimmickson.
yes.
That's 10 rerolls for Tom.
What?
Yeah, that's $50.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's awesome. Appreciate it.
That really helps. Technically, no, rerolls cannot be mine, but we're making an exception here.
Yes, we are.
So you now have
what do you think the benefit would be for people who tip in during disorganized play?
Well,
what would the benefit be?
I mean, do you have to have a benefit all the time? Like the benefit is your years of experience as a GM are here, and okay, you get a reroll, fine.
Well, we can also think about maybe some other things that. Maybe there's a separate like DM pool of like deviousness that gets built up or something like that. I don't know. We'll think about it.
Oh, if you donate, Tom will eventually level up to a level 4 GM.
I'll be a level 4 GM. I can't wait. I don't know. That probably won't happen until I turn 36.
which was 54 years ago.
Wow, that's a lot of callbacks today. So here's what I think about spoiling adventures on a live stream, right? Which is, I don't think there's like a winning formula. It's very difficult to like picture a winning scenario for Wizards in this that doesn't involve a lot of extra work for them, right? Because honestly, like how many games a week is Chris Perkins running right now? Like 3 or something like that?
I think he's only got 1. I think he's only got dice camera action.
Oh, what about the other one? What about the one that was Curse of Strahd? I feel like he's got two games going, but maybe I'm wrong about that. At any rate, so he's got that going on. He also has like a full-time job as like the story lead for them, and he has this job where he goes to conventions and gets dressed up and has to put on a performance, right?
Sure.
And I think unless they want to spend the extra money to have somebody write content just for those special streamed games or free up his time to do that, like it needs to be, really what needs to happen is it needs to be two positions, right?
Yeah.
Like there needs to be somebody who's the kind of the con game GM and the streaming GM, and there needs to be somebody who's the story lead. And I think, I don't know, this is all just my armchair observation, is ideally I think it would be 2 different people doing those things. Not that Chris isn't doing a great job at both of them, but I can easily see how he's under the gun to come up with interesting, compelling content, and he's like, well, I've already written a bunch of interesting, compelling content. It's in this freaking book that you can buy for $50. Why don't we, use this as a marketing opportunity to, sell more of this book? Or why don't I take advantage of all of the hard work that I've done, put into this thing, and do something that I know will be entertaining? So I don't blame him for running that. I do think there should be like there should be a big spoiler alert of don't watch this if you're planning to play this.
It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? As Tabletop Tales says, "Hi, welcome Tabletop Tales." Doesn't a player have a choice to tune in or not tune in? If they don't want to be spoiled, they don't have to watch. So the catch-22, of course, is that as a viewer, if you're a fan of a certain show or something like that, you want to be there and you want to see it. You want to see it live. You don't want to catch it 6 months down the road when you've had a chance to play the session or whatever.
And it's their most popular stream, right? Like of all of Wizards streams, Acquisitions Inc. is like the stuff they do at PAX is the blow-up one, right?
Yeah, I think so. Right now. Yeah.
In terms of like, it's an event,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
They sell tickets to it. People go because they're expecting 4 hours of solid, interesting entertainment.
Right.
It's a marquee event that is going to draw a lot of buzz and whatnot in the nerdosphere.
Yeah. But the other thing is for the people who are putting on the show. You want people to tune in and watch. You don't want people to not be watching because they're afraid of a spoiler or something like that. You want them to be there and be in the audience because that's what makes it interesting. That's the theatrical aspect.
You also don't want people to be like, oh, I'm going to have to log off of Reddit for 3 days because all the AI guys are just talking about everything that was hilarious or wrong or da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in an ideal world, maybe I made my point solid enough. Maybe I may have a point solid enough earlier, but I think they would have their own original content around those things that would not necessarily 100% intersect with. I don't know. It's tough because like when there's a lot of that book to pick from, and so picking the big bad fight from the end as the thing that you're going to showcase. It's a marginal call, right? I don't know. I get why they did it. I also get why people would be like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
I think in an ideal world, they have something similar that's not the same. I also think that they have an opportunity when they create original stuff for streams to then introduce that into the material that they're working on, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So rather than just drawing from the material that's published as a source for all their streaming stuff, they could have this, somewhat unofficial or non-canonical stuff that would be streamed that might be able to find its way into published material, across those streams.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're playing this 107-year-old module.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, it's the. I was really impressed by the actual telegraph tape that they send you that has the box text that you're supposed to ditto out to your players.
Download it now if you have a ticker tape. Oh.
So I mean, I think that's tricky. I don't know. I hate to be one of those. I can see both sides of it, but I can see both sides of it. I think ideally they would do something different, but I don't have their marketing budget I don't know what their marketing budget is or what their bandwidth is.
Well, when we first started Disorganized Play, you were doing Storm King's Thunder,
right?
And I know that we didn't have the game was not being played on the channel.
Yeah.
So you couldn't actually watch the game, but a lot of people wanted to watch Disorganized Play, but did not want to get the game spoiled that they were going to play that night or the next night anyway at Adventures League.
Yeah.
And so, it caused a bit of consternation of how to deal with that. And obviously, in some instances, you just can't get away from something along those lines, especially in this where playing any sort of game, that has surprises or whatever in it, any kind of entertainment that's dealing with that, that's doing a playthrough or whatever, you're going to.
I'm honestly I've painted myself into a corner here because a lot of the time I will either bounce ideas off of my wife or I'll go home and I want to talk to her about the game. But now that we're playing Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, she wants to play that, and I can't. I can't discuss it, and I can't talk about here's a cool thing that I changed, or I'm struggling with this. I can't dissect it with her either, and that's tough. She's she's really smart and insightful, so it's been a tough challenge for me to go. All right, well I got to figure this out on my own. And it's not necessarily some of it. A certain amount of it is like sharing ideas and being inspired off of each other, and then a huge part of it is just saying it out loud and talking through it.
Right.
So anyway, if you're a Patreon backer, you have
the $5 level and up.
At $5 and up, you have these illustrations in the chat. They're gonna find an owl next session. I know that. Was it Shimmickson who?
Blind Seer
kicked it over to that next level, and I know we were right at the end of the session. And honestly, I was looking at the clock, and it was just after 11 o'clock, and I wanted to get to this part of it, right? So I wanted them to feel like they had arrived someplace. But I knew that there was the whole okay, well now we have to deal with this quote-unquote impenetrable door. And I wanted to give that encounter the space to breathe rather than I could easily see it starting and then bogging down, and the next thing you know, it's 11:30 and everybody's kind of looking at you with a hairy eyeball, okay, how does this end? How does it end? So I feel bad that we didn't quite get to this piece of it, to them discovering an owl. There will be many owls throughout the ship, I'm sure. And in fact, maybe what I'll do is I'll do another updated drawing of this and have some different models of owl. That would be fun. I mean, one of the things that I've discovered is I'm not a great artist, and I'm okay with that. But between tracing things and just doing some basic drawing of inanimate objects, I'm terrible at drawing faces and hands and proportional, limbs and all that kind of stuff. But I think it'll be fun to draw some of this stuff, these technological things. Also, I'm not a big fan of some of the drawings that they have in In the book, their laser cannon is the weirdest looking thing. Like I'm okay with like it doesn't look like a freaking laser cannon, but their laser cannon is literally like some sort of like arm brace that goes over your shoulder, and then there's like an overhead projector head that's like.
I could literally make it with one of our monitors and the Joby tripod thing, and just hang that over and just have it like that.
So. Yeah.
How will you describe the pit hair on these creatures?
Yeah, I guess there is a lot of pit hair going on there, isn't there?
Multiple AIs could use owls, but they're of different colors, indicating being part of a different AI.
Yeah, I think there's probably owls that are, there's like an engineering owl, and there's these are, to me this is something like civilians carry and whatnot, and yeah, I think there's a lot of. They're just sort of like the lost children of the ship, right? Which is creepy.
Yeah. I was just thinking you could have a ton of owls, and yeah, they could be color-coded to be different parts of the AI. But they, just like the AIs can't talk to each other, the owls can talk to other owls, but they still have the block. So they'll just, they'll show up, and another AI owl will show up, and they'll go, "Hi, how are you?" "Oh, I'm good, how are you?" "Good." And then the players can be like, "Wait, you're a security owl, and you're a command owl, and you can be oh no, I don't know who that is." You see him, right? Well, yeah, of course I see him. So talk. Oh, well, I
what would I say to him?
What would I say to him?
Tell him about the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell him that.
No. Please, that's security information.
Why would he need to know that?
It's for security and command only. He's a command owl.
He wouldn't understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly possibilities there of there's a lot of I love this theme that's coming up of fractured communication lines and it's almost developing into a theme of tribalism or whatever, right? So, yeah, what if there's a master owl that is in charge of creating and deploying all of the different owls?
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun places that we can go with this. So, it's not in the adventure, but I think we have some opportunity to take something a little Star Trek-y or whatever. I think what I'm getting at is I want to capitalize on the fact that this thing was written before Star Trek: The Next Generation was around, right? It's I don't know how much Star Trek influence there is in this
1,000
thing.
years before it was up. Before
Generation. Yeah, it's weird. They hadn't even invented gasoline when this adventure was written, so that's pretty wild.
Look it up. Look at the 70s. You see the lines from cars waiting at gas stations.
They're just waiting for it to be invented.
Yeah.
That's really what it was.
True.
But I don't know how much inspiration from the show Star Trek was in this adventure. The original series was still fairly fresh at that point, but I would think it'd be pretty hugely nerdy.
I would assume there was definitely some influence there, but looking at the module and the pictures and stuff, it looks like they were taking a lot from a lot of the sci-fi that was coming out, like Logan's Run and stuff of the late 70s, early 80s kind of thing. There's a lot of that sort of tube, kind of technology and stuff. It's almost
it feels like it's kind of I think it's earlier than that. I think it's like Asimov and Heinlein kind of it has a very kind of Robert Heinlein kind of feel to it to me.
Yeah, there's some Kirbyisms though. Some Jack Kirby in there that especially that laser cannon just looks very much like
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's definitely. But so anyway, what I want to do is I want to capitalize on the fact that those influences are missing, right? In terms of Next Generation and Aliens and things like that.
Right.
And those have introduced some concepts that I think we can not necessarily reintroduce one for one, but introduce in a twist. So where it's either you could see the prototype of this thing happening or whatever.
Yeah.
What is this? What's the robot from the movie The Black Hole that was literally like a flying garbage can? Like this,
yeah. Let's see. The evil one was Maximilian, I think.
Oh yeah, there's an evil one and a good one, isn't there?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that movie. Maybe we'll have to watch The Black Hole.
Good luck. Good luck trying to find it.
Oh really?
Yeah.
It's not on streaming because it's Disney, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not. You can't get it anywhere.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to find. I've been wanting to rewatch it for a long time. It gets a bad rap, but I remember loving it as a kid. I forget. I forget the name of that guy.
Yeah, that's all right.
Anyway.
All right, there we go. Well, I think that brings us to a close here today. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Especially big thanks to Shimmickson and Blind Seer for your generous tips.
Yeah, thank you so
going
much.
to take my 25 re-rolls, and they're bi-directional re-rolls, right? I can make players re-roll when they get a good roll, right?
You're breaking the system.
Yeah, breaking it down.
Vincent or Bob, yeah. Vincent, I think, was the name of the good one. Well, I think there was Vincent and Bob, and then Maximilian was an evil. There were two good robots. And then, is it on Amazon Instant right now? Wow, I might have to
All
do
for
that
rent
after
or
this.
purchase. Oh,
I might have to do that
interesting.
after this.
All right. Well, there's your. You know what? Come on over to the house, and I'll pump $4 into the Prime account, and you can come over and watch it at the new place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? So.
All right. Yeah. Thank you guys for the generosity. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us. Tonight is DJ America's GM, David Crennan.
Yeah. DJ America's DM.
DJ America's DM, David Crennan, for our regular weekly Fantasy Flight games. A Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. Never tell me the odds.
It's just episode 2, so it's easy to jump in and check it out. Mon Mothma has just been taken prisoner on New Alderaan, and the players represent the Peace Council, but they haven't been doing a whole lot of peacekeeping of late. So definitely tune in for that if you're interested.
I love how Star Wars always starts with the premise of like, you're the peaceful Jedi who need to negotiate a truce, and then inside of 7 minutes, it's like, who can I murder with a lightsaber first? Because that's what I really want to do.
We'll have another Star Wars talk, I'm sure. I'll start a proficiency check all over again. We'll just talk about Star Wars and my problem with Jedi. Anyway.
Do I get to talk about my problem with Wookiees then?
Sure. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Too many Y's in the name of that planet, I'll tell you something.
I was going to say, there's no Y's in Wookiee. Dumb. What kind of Star Wars fan are you? Poser. You suck. Wookiee.
YHOHCCLE. L is silent. Anyway, yeah, David Party going off the moral rails. Never.
Never.
Yeah.
So that's tonight. The all-star lineup includes Tillian Guerra,
Tyler
Rhodes,
Mason McDaniel, and Zeke Pinero.
Very good. Awesome. So that's tonight at 8 o'clock Pacific, coming up in 4.5 short hours. Tomorrow night, it is episode 2. Speaking of episodes 2.
Yeah.
What is it? So penultimate is the second before the last. What's the second after the first?
Number 2.
We call
it number 2.
a streak.
Yeah.
It is the second Pencooliment. That's what I've just said in a name.
All right.
Pencooliment episode of, if your initial installment. Wild
Personal Pan Ultimate.
It's your Pizza Hut episode of Wild Cards.
Yeah, the Pizza Hut episode.
That's right.
Yeah.
Our Savage Worlds Deadlands game featuring Mr. Dom Zook and Jordan Pridgeon, Megan Caves Gallerman, Gaurav Galati, and I already said Jordan's name, right?
You said Jordan.
Oh, I didn't say Jordan Callerman. Jordan Callerman as the head of sitting here in the hot seat, right, dishing out all the dirt. So you can tune in for that tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Is there anything else coming up before then?
No, nothing coming up. before then.
Okay. And Sunday is Tempting Fate.
Sunday's back to Tempting Fate.
5 p.m.
Yes.
5 p.m. Pacific. So you can tune in. Is it to
It's a
Yugoslavia's GM Rick Budd.
yeah. It's Muscles and Miracles. It's another skin of Lasers and Feelings, which is their sort of high fantasy skin. So B. Dave Walters is our special guest, and we got Gina DeVivo, Sam DeLev, and Max Isaacson are all back, and B. Dave Walters.
Fancy. Very good. So that's Sunday. Yeah, we'll take a look at the tiers again. I was pretty happy with how they worked last night, actually. I think we got a good mix of bumps. If anything, maybe we'll mix in bumps differently, although I thought the combination of story rewards and whatnot worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I guess maybe be more specific, Blind Seer. Are you talking about the ones that are like over $150? Because those are bigger gaps, but they're bigger stretches, I think.
Those are intended to be stretch goals. I mean, we're trying to dial in, and in case it's not obvious, we're trying to dial in $150 as sort of like the sweet spot, and we don't want to, feel like the audience feel like they're getting juiced every single week, but also like we need to budget to kind of keep on track and pay rent, right? So, and we're a little bit behind on that this month. So,
exciting.
So, I mean, maybe we will add in some additional, one thing that I wanted to try to avoid, because I know it makes Dom's life a little bit of a nightmare, is when there's 17 tiers, he's like, okay, where are we at? But I'm not opposed to adding in some of those additional things. Part of it, too, keep in mind when I was putting that together last night, is... if I have 11 rerolls, I'll do something with that money. I don't know that I'll convert it all into rerolls. But part of my thinking too is if there are bumps in that mix over $200, or as we approach $200, $250, $300, if there are bumps in there, I don't know how much of incentive bumps are, because generally we're so far into the session at that point that one of two things is happening. Either the players really need them, in which case, okay, well then there's incentive to hit those tiers, or the players really do not need them because they're like, are we going to get into another fight in the last 20 minutes of the game? It's tough to calibrate that. So I try and front load a lot of the bumps and things towards the lower tiers, and then that's why you see things stretch out $50 to the next big thing. And those are generally plot bender things that I know I can either put into a session without having to worry about where we're at in the session, or I can I did with the owls, I can pocket it and go, okay, it's not coming, we didn't quite get there, but it's gonna happen in the next session pretty close to the beginning, right? In the first half, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's some of the psychological thinking behind okay, well there's bumps at the lower levels, and then the tiers begin to really stretch out. That's where I was at last night when I threw it together. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Please tune in either tonight, tomorrow night, Sunday, all three. Thank you so much for your tips and contributions today. Also, your conversation, your questions, your suggestions. They all are grist for the inspiration mill here. Thanks for everyone who shares our site on their various social media outlets that they peruse. Spreading the word is the cheapest and yet still effective thing that you can do for us.
Very effective, yes.
So we really appreciate that. We've got some great new subs in and whatnot, and changed our numbers. Thanks to Fawquad and BSB Care and all of our mods who keep the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible for all of our visitors.
And come on down to the Discord if you have further questions for Tom that you want him to answer on a future episode.
Yes.
Go ahead and drop them off on our Discord.
Then I will sign up for the Discord and get involved. Give me a reason to get in there. Give me a reason to get in there.
There's an Iron Keep channel that you can go and certainly ask questions, or you could ask them in the general, whatever. There's a sub-only channel if you're a subscriber on our Twitch. You can come in and check that out. Yeah, Tom is not on there.
I will
but
tune in.
It
Honestly,
doesn't matter because I can pass on questions to Tom.
I'm on a lot of social media the way that it is, but I will be happy to join in. I can't guarantee hawk-eyed participation, but I will.
This guy's on.
Fuck what! I accepted your friend request. We're now officially Twitch friends.
Oh.
I will admit.
Bastion's got it. Yeah.
I will admit that I'm very stingy with my Facebook friends. So if
It's true. We're not friends on Facebook.
Are we not friends on Facebook?
I think we are.
I don't know.
I'm friends with some guy named Bill Cavalier. I don't know.
I guess it. So, I got some dry erase product when I went to Staples today. I had a little extra time to make a little trip to the office supply store.
Drinky.
Some guys are into heroin or a heavy drinking problem. I'm into office supplies. There you go. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, let's dungeon.
Great.
Oh wow,
We did it.
You are 10 for 50 rerolls.